Okay, so I've given myself a couple of hours to maybe calm down and unpack and digest some and even rewatch some of the game against Lebanon. Obviously, the result was not good. That was not up to par with what is expected by many people. Of course, this is the main tournament now, not qualifiers, not uh, Sea Games or whatever. This is FIBA Asia Cup, so I think more of our kababayans were expecting bigger things, like maybe even smashing Lebanon. But this is a very different team from what Gilas normally puts out. So yeah, and the result aside, there were some bright spots. It wasn't just all bad, not good. First of all, I would like to bring up the third year Avena incident. It was late in the second quarter when he took a big fall. I think he got caught in the Lebanon player who was driving to the rim, but was fouled by Kevin Cambao. So Thirdy Ravenna took a big fall, and I'm glad to see that he's fine. He was taken in a wheelchair after that incident. Just a couple of minutes later, he was playing in the third quarter. I think that was very stupid. I think that was the stupidest decision that the coaching staff made this entire game, which says a lot. You know, he shouldn't have been playing so recently after that incident, because in those minutes in the early third quarter, he was looking a little bit disoriented and dazed. He wasn't willing to attack the basket like he was doing in the first half. Especially when Renz Abando, who later inspired the mini comeback that we had, and Francis Lopez hasn't played yet in the game. So I really don't think that Third Ravenna is worth risking. It's a long tournament. So yeah, hope that he's well. I think he's going into concussion protocol. They're already down Dwight Ramos, who got replaced by Renz Abando. So this team is incredibly light. So we'll see. Okay, now on to the actual game. Just preface this by saying that Lebanon played extremely well throughout the entire game, except for maybe a stretch in the fourth quarter. But apart from that, they were flawless, I would say. They took advantage of their height mismatch with us. That was especially prevalent in the third quarter, where they made a very big run. A big part of that is that when we were doing pick and rolls, they were doing what New Zealand did to us a couple weeks ago, which was to blitz the ball handler, because our ball handlers are smaller than their defenders. So passing out of the trap will be a lot more difficult, which led to some turnovers. Kiefer Rabena throughout the game had a lot of trouble, especially guarding El Darwich, who was 6'4", and also Wael Arakji, who had an amazing game. He truly showed that he is a world class player on the international level. So in the first quarter, we started the game well with Ray Parks shooting good, which was a theme for this whole game. Ray Parks did shoot well throughout the game. He finished with 15 points. I think he had two back-to-back threes. In the beginning, Lebanon's pace was so quick, so quick, that the team had a lot of trouble keeping up with them on defense, especially in the paint because they could not set up their defense. I think this was also a theme of what Gilas had this entire game. They had a lot of trouble setting up their defense. They had trouble finding their defensive identity. Their scheme was pretty much non-existent, if I'm being honest. So on in the first quarter, actually Jeo Chu had a solid enough game dealing with the big men of Lebanon. He was the big man with the least fouls, which is not really an accomplishment, but solid wasn't good enough for this front line of Lebanon, which was their import Jonathan Alridge, who really was not aggressive in this game, but he had a great shooting touch. I was very surprised of that. He finished the game with 19 points on 60% shooting, most of those jumpers. And their other big man who was Haik Gyokchian. See, I know the pronunciation. Who's also a stretch five, which made it difficult for our big men to keep up. He finished the game with also 19 points with 8 rebounds and 4 out of 5 from 3. Kevin Kiambao, as much as his passes were utterly amazing, of course we know that's his biggest skill set, he had a lot of trouble dealing with these Lebanon big men because of his size misadvantage. And even Poi Aram, we know his weakness. In the first quarter, he already had two quick fouls, two very soft fouls, I would say. I think of all the big men that played today, he was the worst performing, which is not good for the veteran PBA guy in a field of amateurs. Other notes from early on in the game, SJ Balangel started very well. In the first quarter, he already had 9 points, and that would continue on into the second half. In the second quarter, the refereeing was not very good to both teams. One thing that I hated, honestly, this game was the commentary on One Sports. I think Kinito Henson was commentating, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, something just felt off, and it was feeling a way too biased. If even exceeding the Gilas Tito bias. Yeah. So in the second quarter, 3-point shooting that was in the first quarter dried up, which was the opposite in the third quarter after 30's injury. Everyone was shooting well. We had Parks, we had 30, concussion 30. But we also had Lebanon shooting well. So every make that we had, they had two. And that's where the lead snowballed. Defense was a huge negative on that part, in that quarter. The biggest lead was 79-58 at the end of the third. Then fourth quarter came in and Carl Tamayo really took over the game. I think this was one of his best games in a Gilas jersey. He finished the game with 15 points, mostly in the fourth quarter, of course. 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal, and 3 blocks on 60% shooting. Along with some pretty stellar defense, pretty quick hands to throw off the Lebanon ball handlers. The combo of course, after 30 was taken out of the game, Renz Abando came in. I would like to see Renz Abando get more minutes throughout the tournament. The five-man lineup of Belangel, Abando, Tamayo, Will Navarro, and Poy Eram was the best we had on the floor throughout the night. They had a 16-4 run on a pretty much sleeping, maybe complacent Lebanon defense, mostly because of Abando's intensity and hustling, along with Will Navarro, who most of the night he was pretty quiet except for that run. But after the most of the starters came back in the fourth quarter, Lebanon finally woke up and just finished off the match really. But other than that, I don't think there was a lot more that I can talk about. RJ Barrientos came on for a couple of minutes, but clearly he was injured as reported before the match that he got injured. I think he sprained his ankle in training. So the next game is tomorrow at 4 p.m. against India. You know, a lot of people may point to coaching, but I don't think that the coaching was too bad this game, except for maybe the defensive side of it, because the offensive side of the ball was great. The infamous DDO or dribble drive offense that Chot has was very much at the minimum, and also the very infamous ISO Gilas was also at the minimum. Only Parks was the one who had ISOs and maybe some for Belangel. And they were doing a lot of pick and roll offense, which is a system that Coach Nenad employs. So I think they blended their systems pretty well. They have yet to find their defensive identity, but that could come as the tournament goes on. I will back this with stats that I saw on Twitter from Ryan Alba, who is the stats guy from Smart Sports. During this game, Gilas had an offensive rating of 106.4, but they had a defensive rating of 126.3. That means that every 100 possessions, they will score 106 points or they will let 126 points up on defense. That is horrible. So hopefully they'll find a fix. But we'll see. Prayers up for 30 Ravenna. And congratulations to Lebanon.